this is notes. So our objective is to review more problems using factoring to solve. Okay, so number 4 was the one of them that we skipped, and it said find two integers whose sum is 13 and whose squares total 89. So this one's a little bit different because we're not told like one is 2 more than the other or something like that. So this gets a little bit more complicated. And we had talked about how do you define two variables or two unknowns with one variable when you're told what they add up to. So let's say we forgot how to do that, and let's go back to a strategy that works when there's two unknowns. Let's use a system. So in that case, I would define the two numbers this way. First number, y is the second number. So the first sentence says find two integers whose sum is 13. So that says x plus y equals 13. And then whose squares total 89. So x squared plus y squared equals 89. So what do you think we could do, bless you, to solve this system? What would be a good strategy to use for this one? What?
Substitution?
Yeah, we're not ready yet for substitution, so we're going to have to alter that first equation in order to do substitution. So Miles, would you like to solve for x or for y? What would you prefer?
Solve for x.
Okay, so what we're going to do is subtract y from both sides, which is going to give me x equals 13 minus y. I'm going to take this value for x, and I'm going to substitute it in for x in the other equation. So now I get 13 minus y, that quantity squared, plus y squared equals 89. Now, what we had talked about earlier in the years, if I'm told I have two numbers and I know their sum, or I have a total, one is x and one is total minus x, which is exactly what we got when we did solving that top equation for the x. So when I expand this out, remember this is 13 minus y times 13 minus y. I'm going to get 13 times 13 is 169. Negative 13y and negative 13y is negative 26y. Negative y times negative y is positive y squared. And then plus the y squared equals the 89. So I'm going to subtract 89 from both sides to get everything on the left. I have some like terms, so I'm going to combine them up. So I get 2y squared minus 26y, and then plus, looks like 80 equals 0. Now, I notice they're all even coefficients, so I'm going to factor out the GCMF of 2, and I get y squared minus 13y plus 40 equals 0. So I'm going to play the game with what are factors of positive 40 that add to give me negative 13. And that would be negative 8 and negative 5. Okay? So this becomes 2 times the quantity y squared minus 8y minus 5y minus 40. And what, oh yeah, thank you, plus 40. And this kind of goes back to what Maddie was saying. If you watch what happens, because I pulled out the GCMF, now the coefficient in front of the quadratic term is 1. So look at those factors of negative 8 and negative 5, and look where they show up as we go through the factoring process. So I get y from this group, leaving behind a y minus 8. Here I'm going to have to pull out a negative 5, giving me a y minus 8. And this factors into 2 times the quantity y minus 8, and then y minus 5. So notice that these factors ended up here and here. And that's only because the quadratic coefficient was 1. If the quadratic coefficient doesn't equal 1, then it doesn't work. So I caution you on using this notion because I don't want you to think this works every single time. But if you feel comfortable with this, then I would go from the game to the 2 times the quantity y minus 8 times the quantity y minus 5 equals 0. Okay? Ian.
So, like for the 2 in front there,
Mm-hmm.
could you just take that out, like once you took it, because you know that
No.
it's never going to equal 0?
It's still part of what you get when you factor, so you can't remove it, but it just doesn't end up being part of the answer. So if you remove it, then I have to remove points because now you've changed the value. Because if I just multiplied out y minus 8 times y minus 5, I am not going to get the original equation of 2y squared minus 26y plus 80. Okay? So you got to keep that coefficient out in front. You just realize that I don't even need to bother setting it equal to 0 because a number can never equal 0 unless it's 0. And then if it equaled 0, then I got nothing altogether. Miles?
So we have to keep it there, but we don't have to set it equal to 0?
No.
Okay.
So we add 8, we add 5, and we get y equals 8 and y equals 5. So basically I have 2 possibilities, but here's the deal. That's just y. If I wanted to figure out x, and I plugged back in over here to this simpler equation, 8 plus what gives you 13? 5. 5 plus what gives you 13?
8.
Those are the 2 answers, are the 8 and the 5, because they're the partners that add up to equal 13. So let's see, where would I write my answers? I'm going to erase up here for just a minute. We'll just erase this temporarily. And you would say the integers are 8 and 5. And again, the order of those are not important. And the word and is right here because I have 2 different numbers. And I need to have those 2 numbers to actually make this work. Okay? Maddie?
Would you put or instead of and?
Or is when they're talking about an individual answer, and we ended up finding 2 that worked. Or we had 2 sets of numbers that worked, so I'd have to put an or between each of the sets. All right, here comes the fun one. This is the number 7. So this one says a rug placed in a room 8 meters long and 6 meters wide, covers half the floor, area, and leaves a uniform strip of bare floor around the edges. What are the dimensions of the rug? So thinking back to problems that we dealt with area and rectangles, what is this most like? Yeah, it's most like a frame. Okay, so we have a room. And what are the dimensions of the room? We have an 8 feet by 6 feet. So longer's got to be the 8, shorter's got to be the 6. And then we put in a rug. And the rug is placed so that there's a uniform strip of bare floor that shows. And what we want to do is to figure out what the dimensions of the carpet are. So what are we going to let be x in this problem? Not the area of the carpet, because x would mean both the dimensions are the same.
The length of the
Nope.
The area of bare floor.
It's that strip, that uniform strip. It's not the area. This, from here to here, would be x. From here to here would be x. From here to here would be x from here to here. So it's the width of the frame, so to speak, of bare floor is dimension of x. So this one gets a little tricky when we do our chart. So our chart is going to have a room and it's going to have a rug. It's going to have a length, it's going to have a width, and it's going to have an area. So the room is easy. The length is 8, the width is 6, the area would be the product, 48. So here's where it gets tricky. How would I describe the length of the rug? Looking at the picture, how would I describe the length of the rug? Brian?
8 minus x.
Okay, here's the deal. With your 8 minus x, this is where you've gotten to. Here's your 8. And now I'm going to go back x of it. Oops, stop. I'm going to go back x of it. So what you've described goes beyond the rug. Okay? So continue on. You're not quite done. If I want it only go from red edge to red edge, I've got it all the way to the black corner and then to a red edge. So what am I going to need to do to get it to the red edge?
Minus 2x.
You're going to have to subtract that other x, right? So this is actually going to be 8 minus 2x. Okay, now that we've got that down, what do you think it's going to be for?
6 minus 2x.
Yeah, the width is going to be 6 minus the 2x. So it's 6 minus the x, which is 6 minus 2x. Okay? Now, we go back to the problem. It says the rug placed in a room 8 meters long and 6 meters wide covers half the floor area. Well, I know what the area is. It's 48, so then the area of the rug would be half of that. And just like what happened in the example we did yesterday, we're going to get our equation just from here. Because the top one, there's no equation because there's no variables involved. So we're going to have length times width. So 8 minus 2x times a is 6 minus 2x equals 1/2 of 48. So because this is a little bit more complicated, when I do my distribution, I'll do all 4 separately. So I have 8 times 6 is 48. 8 times negative 2x is negative 16x. Negative 2 times 6 is negative 12x. And negative 2x times negative 2x is positive 4x squared. Half of 48 is 24. I'm going to subtract 24 from both sides. Combine up any like terms. I have my terms here are like terms. And I get 4x squared minus 28x plus 24 equals 0. So I'm looking and I'm like, whoo-hoo, GCMF of 4. Yes, it's going to make my life so much easier. So I get 4 times the quantity, x squared minus 7x plus 6. Okay. So now I'm going to look at what are factors of positive 6 that add to give me negative 7.
Negative 6.
The ones that we, for some reason, forget about. Okay, the obvious ones. So, thinking back to what we've been talking about with that if the quadratic coefficient is equal to 1, those factors are going to be the ones that show up in the binomial. So, when I factor, I get 4 times the quantity x minus 6, x minus 1 equals 0. Okay? So I'm going to set each one of the factors that contains a variable equal to 0 and solve. So I add 6, and I get x equals 6. Add 1, I get x equals 1. So now I'm going to have to go back and test for reasonableness. Okay, so I'm going to test 6 in as the dimensions of my rug. So that would give me, if I put 6 in, 8 minus 2 times 6 gives me negative 4. All right, that just tells me right now 6 cannot be that uniform strip around. Because think about it, if this is meters, and a meter is like a yard, and you're having 6 yards of flooring showing up, that's huge. So that's a big problem. That's not going to work. So he gets thrown out because he's completely not reasonable. So we do have reasonable, though, with the 1. So what I'm going to do is figure out my two answers by getting rid of this guy, and I'm going to plug 1 into each of these. So I have 8 minus 2 times 1, which is going to give me 6. And I'm going to have 6 times 2 times 1, which is going to give me 4. So I'm going to do a little erasing of my drawing here so I can write my answer. I'm just trying to keep this on one screen for you guys. And they wanted to know just the dimensions of the rug. So the length of the rug is 6 meters, and its width is 4 meters. And there's your answer. Okay?